So this is the series of videos which are going to address all these questions that came after me posting the video on sexuality and the roots for the sexual misery and perversion we're living through, and how sexuality has become an unnatural way of being rather than a natural way of self-expression. So I would just address different questions which you posted on either section of comments below the video or you sent me by email. So the statement about the female's natural ability to perceive their being kind of raised a lot of questions in the minds of men. And some of you write that, what about those great sages who were in male bodies, or Vedic statements that to be a man or to be born in a male body is such an advantage. Well, we have to remember that we are not living in any kind of an era of enlightenment or even close to that. We are deeply immersed in the ages of ignorance, where everything seems to be not the way it actually is. And the result of this is our current life. I mean, we try to escape from it, we try not to look at it, we try to hide, we don't want to listen to it or about it. But the fact is that we are living in the age of drugs, age of sexual perversion, sexual abuse, poverty, spiritual poverty, mental poverty, intellectual poverty. And even though the point of the video was to show that originally, yes, the female's role in the society is supposed to be the guide and the driving force behind the social management, it cannot be so right now, because the whole system of education, the political structure, the social structure is very different and is not based on those original principles. We don't have such education system that would give women the idea of who they really are. So women are fed with beauty magazines, fashion industry, and so on. And basically the society is based on addictive traits, like the more we make the society addicted on certain things, the more we make money on them. So the addictive personality, narcissistic traits, spiritual narcissism, spiritual ignorance are the predominant qualities of this current age. And because of that, the understanding of gender is also perverted and very much mixed. Now, someone asked, what about homosexuality? What about people who have a twisted understanding of who they are and their gender? Well, the society is trying to accept so many things in it, or which exist in it, that are of a imbalanced nature as normal, because the abnormality become more than normality. We don't have anything normal anymore. We don't have anything balanced. We have only imbalance. And what comes to homosexuality, or like one of the people who commented here, why is there homosexuality and lesbianism? Why? Because there is a lot of abuse. There is no such a thing as balanced family, or this balance is only on a superficial level, because the majority of people are not able to understand what is the true partnership, what is true mating, what is true base or foundation for the family, for for partnership, for being together. So people do not know what the family is actually, and the actual family values have long gone. What we have right now is just random meetings. Okay, still there is a social idea that, yeah, okay, at some point I want to procreate, but then the choice of partners is not based on inner contentment, it's based on inner flaws, inner distortions, inner pains, or desire to compensate these pains. Now, the children who are born through abuse, through physical, mental, psychological abuse, or their parents, the mothers, were abused while carrying them, while being pregnant, or their fathers were abusive or mothers were abusive. So such kids, such children, when they grow up, they have straight road to escapism, to the world of Neverland. And this kind of people are more and more because the abuse imbalance is growing. That's why desire to use drugs to escape from life through fake and disrupting spirituality through all kinds of escapist ideas of better worlds, aliens, or sexual perversion and imbalanced expression of sexual being through the traumatic experiences of the early childhood predominate. They all come out. In addition to that, the society is trying to impose that homosexuality and lesbianism, as you write, is normal, when it has to be addressed as one of the imbalances, inner imbalances, deep psychological, traumatic, psychiatric even, psychological imbalances within a person. And through my work, for instance, just can share, I have faced a lot of people who have the orientation, homosexual orientation, and yet through their spiritual work, through actual desire to understand the roots of their orientation, they realize that that orientation was shaped or developed due to the traumatic abuse or traumatic scenario in their lives, in their very early childhood, or in the during their mother's pregnancy time. There are other reasons of an occult nature that can also affect one's orientation or sexual choices. But nevertheless, these are all different distortions that have to be properly addressed in the society, not promoted, but there has to be a very gradual support to this kind of people so that they truly understand who they are through their spiritual quest, through their desire to refine themselves and understand who they are without trying to impose or approve whichever imbalances we have or we might have and take them for normal. And with the development of the society, or I would say even with the degradation of the society, certain things can be accepted as normal, certain practices can be abandoned or accepted back. So there is no such a thing as a standard, of course. But the scale through which you have to measure is the sense of contentment within self. Would you go and do all what you want to go and do if you were content? If you were naturally blissful, equanimous, aware of self, you wouldn't do certain things. Now, because there's a lot of violence which is suppressed in the society, in families, in children, it finds its way through the sexual perversion, through another level of sexual expression, through addictive personality traits where there's always another level, there's something else to look for. The same traits are found in spiritual race for enlightenment. And this is all just traps because people don't understand that there is no other level. If they cannot experience and be in their natural way, in their equanimous way, they will always look for something. They will always create linear ways to achieve something, to pursue something, to have ambitions about something. And they will refuse or find excuses not to look at the root problems. They will excuse themselves because they just don't want to look through their dirty laundry. They don't want to really refine themselves because it's a hard work. No, they're looking for real solutions. That's why spiritual narcissism and the petting of that spiritual narcissism prevails in the spirituality, in this current day and age spirituality, where everyone looks to be seen as special, as seen as the spiritual being. Everybody is a spiritual being, no matter what they did, but in potentiality, through their actions, through the restlessness within, they're not able to tap into that being and remain in that being for long times. So that's why they have to create an idea, a pathway towards that being. When there is no pathway, it's just anyways, anytime there. And so we have this spirituality which gives you levels, which gives you false ideas about your false progress. Because the only progress is your refinement, removal of all these which are not you. And you can only discover it when you're able to access the inner contentment, the being of self as a content being, which is blissful in nature, where you see that all these pursuits are false in nature. And the reasons for those are distortions within, the inability to feel complete in each given moment of time. And that's why you need someone to explain you something. You need some tools and means onto which you can hold. That's why it is you who support the false spirituality, the age of ignorance, and the perversion, because it is the cumulative, it is the collective consciousness that brings it all to the surface so that we can see it. The wiser ones, the mature ones, they recognize it, so they start working on it. The more immature ones delude themselves with false stories, illusionary spiritual pursuits, practices, and other things which don't lead them to anywhere, but support another illusion, another idea, another ambition, another pursuit, until one day they're tired and they sit down and allow themselves to be, and they discover that they've just wasted time and life energy. Instead, it was always there. The natural being was always there. People also ask about supremacy of women or men. The point is not supremacy. The point is the harmonious being together, where both genders complement each other. A female being does not mean compassion, love, and empathy. In fact, there is no such a thing as female quality and male quality, because human being is able to perceive within self compassion, love, but love and compassion, the way we understand it right now, is not true love. It's based on the inner perversion, on inner narcissism, which means emotional love, love of attachment, love of demonstration, love of inability to be content. That is not love. Because all the positive qualities or negative qualities, emotional qualities, subside into neutrality, into equanimous being. You are able to emanate love only when you're equanimous, when you're neutral emotionally, because love is beyond emotions. Now, what you call love is the emotional love. Is love based on fear of being hurt, of not being with others, or having some disconnect from other beings? That is not love. That is a need for social contact, for tactile feeling, for warmth. But it has nothing to do with real being, which is blissful and empty. Only that emanates true feeling of love, which is unconditional. It has nothing to do again with feminine or masculine, because true compassion is detached. It's not based or born out of inner pain or discontentment. Empathy is based on inner pain and desire to avoid that pain. So most of the people who are hurt to any degree or have ever experienced any pain, they try to avoid it. So that's why there's a natural empathy and compassion, emotional empathy, emotional compassion, not higher evolved, wise compassion and empathy, which is based on non-interference. Because wise people know that everything is right at any point of time. And we're just reliving our judgment days, our self-punishment, our self-sabotage, and so on. So masculine features and feminine features, these are socially defined things. There's no such a thing like that. Female people or female species are able to experience the same emotions as the male. The way they experience and express them may differ, but otherwise the emotions are all the same. And what makes true man or a man for a man is when he gets truly in touch with his emotions and is able to express them in a constructive way, or when he's fine being emotional rather than being emotionally suppressed. So that requires a lot of courage from a male to go over the imposed social boundaries about self-expression and to realize that I am strong and courageous as a man by being able to feel and express myself constructively in an emotional way, or be able to acknowledge my emotions and be aware of my emotions. When it comes to feminine qualities, females are extremely strong. They have to be resilient due to their birthing mechanism. So true female qualities are not these cunning and manipulative creatures, but beings who are approaching life wisely, who are able to see something that others cannot notice. Like male cannot notice something, the female can notice and acknowledge. The female acknowledges own strength and own ability to resist a lot of negative things that can arise outwards or inwards, or can arise within the female or outside the female. So the female has to be able to find solutions to survive in whichever circumstances. And so she's very flexible and adaptable, and that is her strength. And there are other strengths. Physically, female will always be weaker than male species naturally. I'm speaking about natural. I'm not speaking about hormonally morphed human beings which are having strange bodies and appearances. I'm talking about original female and male species, which is supposed to have, if a female is strong within, she is weaker on the outside. And the male is strong on the outside and is more sensitive and emotional within. So they complement each other. They're supposed to complement. Now, due to all kinds of perversion, abuse, emotional imbalances in families, the roles have become very imbalanced, the expression of self very imbalanced. So now nobody knows what is actually the balanced way of female expression, the balanced way of the male expression. And that's why children get very mixed messages. And when they grow up, they don't even know who. Sometimes they question their genders. They see constant fighting of parents or different forms of abuse or traumatic experiences due to the imbalanced relationship between their parents or some traumatic separations. And so they carry this within themselves and express it through desire to escape, desire to be something else, because their individuality has not shaped in a proper environment, in the nurturing environment, not over nurturing, but nurturing in a balanced way. The education system has not prepared them to understand themselves deeper. It has fed them with all kinds of fake ideas about their existence. And so they have no idea who they are, yet they have a bag of rubbish which they carry with themselves. And when they leave the school, they try to explore and understand their inner self, because our education does not give us any idea or means to explore ourselves from the early age. And by the time we graduate, we have no idea, and that's where we get into all kind of exploration. And many times we get it wrong. We go into wrong path, into self-damaging path, because by that time we feel like we were bullied, we were traumatized, we need something else. And some people find it in drugs, some people find it in alcohol, some people find it through sexual perversion or imbalanced sexual activity. Some people find it in escapist spirituality or religion. And so the roots of the perversion, the roots of the imbalance are never addressed. People keep on suffering, keep on searching without really understanding that there's nowhere to go and nothing to search, it's already there. The secret is just here. So they create, their minds create more and more complicated paths to explain the reality, to explain their misery, to excuse themselves for staying in misery, because complexity, complicated paths are easier to comprehend for such a mind. Now, if the education system was different and emphasizing more self-expression and understanding the roots of one's desires, of one's inclinations from the early age, by the age of 20, most of the people would have probably been much wiser, much more aware of all kinds of life traps. But for the society, it's not profitable to prepare such a society, such a better society. We talk about overpopulation, yet our means to address sexuality, sex life, female-male differences are very poor. We have not developed any proper way of teaching and making children understand how to create families, how to strengthen their being through relationships, and how to address their weaknesses through relationships as well, how to understand the differences. Instead, all we teach is escapism or extremes. And that's why our society is driven by extremes. Falsehood, error, and inner emptiness, which is narcissism. Spiritual narcissism, emotional narcissism, emotional vampirism, because we don't know other ways. It passes on from one parent to the other parent, from one generation to the other, and it's getting worse. Now, what is even worse, that we look for easy solutions. We are not the generation that would like to work on anything. For work, we understand only physical exertion. That's why such false disciplines like false physical yoga, other disciplines related to spirituality are so popular, because that's what we think spirituality and achievement, spiritual achievement is about. But yet, by doing for tens of years these exercises, there is no any progress on a spiritual level. There is no any deeper understanding of self. Maybe a little bit deeper understanding of the body, but that's all. We think that if we start eating everything organic, well, everything is organic anyways. The food's supposed to be organic, natural. If we start buying some superfoods and so on, we're going to live longer and better. The length of life doesn't matter. What matters is the quality and what you're trying to accomplish here as a spiritual being, as a being who came to refine self. Because once you awake to all these distortions, it's not everything. There's another false utopia. And so many self-proclaimed gurus come from it because they awake and they think that this is it. They haven't refined themselves. They haven't gone through anything to really understand what that's for. But it feels exciting. It gives a little buzz, bliss, and so they decide that this is it. Awakening to the equanimous being, experience of Samadhi, is just the birth, the rebirth, the realizing that is actually always there. But now, how do I go about it? How do I deal with all that which I'm not, which I discover that I'm not, with the world that I'm in? So this is a challenge, and this requires a lot of inner work, inner contemplation, which will not give you certificates or rewards, which will not proclaim you as anything. And that's why it's only for mature ones, which are very rare on this planet at this moment of time. And it doesn't really matter what you think about any subject or anybody thinks. It's always about perception, how you perceive. At some point you might have this opinion, at the other point you might have that opinion. Once you're able to establish yourself in the being and refine yourself, it doesn't really matter. You know your own truth, and this is it. You don't need to proclaim it, you can share it. You don't need to shout about it everywhere. And all the questions dissolve in that equanimity, in that inner, beautiful being of self. So the question was, once you have refined and found the right girl, one who is emotionally stable and can be a good partner, how much sex takes place? Once a week? Do you try to progressively minimize, transform sexual urges, distortions with her? Is the ultimate goal a sexless relationship where all sexual energy is sublimated and sex is only used for procreation? You see, it's like you have your stomach, You have your hands, your eyes, your ears, and you use them according to the necessity. So these are natural senses which are given to us once we come or are born here as the embodiment of consciousness. Now, the way you use your hands or ears or eyes is up to you, up to your conscious level. Because in many cultures, nudity was taboo, natural expression of self was restricted. So the sexual perversion naturally occurred with time and spiritual degradation. People start associating sexual pleasure with the top pleasure because they're not able to experience blissful being anymore. So the only way that they can experience this blissful emptiness is a minute after the sexual act. And that's why they're associated with one of the highest pleasures. Or they then resort to drugs, which can imitate at the beginning this feeling and eventually leads to complete bodily destruction, psychological, mental, conscious, and so on. So if you approach, there's nothing wrong with the sexual act per se. It's just a natural copulation of bodies. But at which mental or emotional state you are, if you are both coming from the inner emptiness and contentment, and you have deep spiritual and emotional and mental connection, yet at the same time your emotional connection is not based on some sort of imbalanced emotions, or like one is trying to leak the pains of the others and that's why they connect, or that there is no emotional imbalance in the relationships, which is impossible right now. That's why sex is perverted, or it's seen as one of the ways to release whatever is repressed within. So it cannot be the original beautiful act of connection. And so even when people try to do it for the procreation reasons, they end up attracting lower kind of vibration souls. And so it becomes like a circle, continuous circle. Then some deceased souls push the bodies or push some living beings to engage into sexual activity, so that on that kind of a vibration level, so that they can have a chance to be born again through this kind of vibration and have certain experiences. So we have been living through this, so to speak, judgment day, perversion, self-punishment, misuse of spiritual knowledge, times for a very long time, for more than 4,000 or 5,000 years. Now, if sex was approached from the point of inner emptiness and contentment, without any disturbed emotions, yet like a flow, where the body is just a continuation of that conscious expression of self, then it would enhance these people's understanding of self and also spiritual experience. And it would not leave any impression on their minds. And in Siddha Tantra, some sacred teachings, whether in whichever tradition, which bears that seed of awakening and transformation, there was never taboo about it. The question is with which mind you approach it. Do you get attached to this act? But if you already experience blissful emptiness, and then you have a connection with some being through the body, it doesn't leave any impression, because that blissful emptiness is continuous. And it can be found in the song of Tilopa, for example, who very vividly expresses that actually it's one of the acts also to enhance the experience. But unfortunately, for the majority of people, which is everybody, except some dozens of people in this world, this is ununderstandable act. And even those people who dream about soulmates and tantric sex, it's all false. There's no understanding of what they're doing and how, because their emotions are not refined. Their inner self is not refined. And that's why when they get engaged in this kind of activities, they don't benefit spiritually and they drain themselves. Draining of energy is not about sexual acts or even ejaculation, if that is the case. It's about emotional expression during this act and during the exact act of emission of the sexual fluid. So it has to do with the connection of this emotional, mental imbalance with the act, where normally the person is not able to express themselves, but now through this act they can. They kind of are able to express more than in normal case. And that's why they get addicted to it and they see it as some sort of a release for themselves. And so it becomes an addiction, an act of addiction. Or some people need a new level because there is a lot of pain inside and it needs to be released through all kinds of sexual perversions or trials, because there is no other way of channeling that disturbed, imbalanced emotional self. Yet they don't want to look at the roots of this imbalanced self. So through this act, they kind of feel release. It's like you take Panadol when you have a headache, yet you don't treat the root cause of the headache. And it could be anything. The root cause can be anything. So the loss of energy always happens through emotional and mental exertion rather than physical. And emotions that are mingled with the act, as well as fragmented self-identity, which means inability to really experience contentment and self-being, which is love. So there's no love to self. Love to self doesn't mean that I go and do egoistic acts only for myself. No, love to self means I'm able to experience myself as equanimous, content, balanced being. And because that's not there, there is emptiness within. And that emptiness has to be filled in with something. So they fill it in with whichever means are given by this reality, self-created, self-imagined, given by the society, and so on. Thank you for listening, and may wisdom be there for every one of us.